she walks in and he goes, oh, it's Kristen Mackey. I thought you didn't know who it was. I was looking for Kristen Gravely. So he said the same thing. He went, Matt can't get you in by Thursday. No, Matt, I will. So, morning, guys.
Good morning. Good morning.
Okay, we will call this meeting to order. It is August 4th, Monday. This is the Broadwater County Commissioners meeting. Would you guys join us, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, first on the agenda is Judy Tice, Department of Revenue, County Valuations Delivery. You guys all want to come on up? There's padded seats up here.
More comfortable, huh?
Better than a padded room.
Yeah, that
So the construction started?
Not much, we got through.
Well, you don't want to plan ahead for it, you know?
Yes.
Last time we came out here, we were like 20 minutes late because you had that hold up, so we planned.
The other day I was supposed to be in Helena by a certain time and forgot. I just thought, oh, I'll give myself an hour. As I'm walking out the door, I thought, oh, Mrs. Gravely, construction. But I like you, I hit it just right, so it was okay.
This is Elaine Gravely. I'm Laura Obert. This is Ann Rouser, our clerk. She takes the minutes for us.
Okay, and the gentleman in the yellow shirt?
My name's Alan Pura. A-L-A-N, last name is P as in Peter, E-U-R-A.
Thank you.
Have you always been with Revenue?
For 6 years. I was with the legislative branch before that.
Aha, there it is. That didn't make sense. I knew you looked familiar and the name was familiar, but I couldn't.
Okay.
Nice to meet you, Alan.
Very nice to meet you. We're pleased to be here this morning. And
We hope it's good news.
well, actually, we think it is for the most part. We wanted to come here today, of course, because last year we had the Heidecker decision that the Montana Supreme Court submitted that had an impact on the certification of values process and the results. And so today, that's why I wanted to be here today. I asked Judy and Rocky if they would mind if I came and just had a chance to be a part of delivering the certified values to you. And we're really pleased that the values are complete this year. And they include all of the value changes to all the subdivisions that were affected by the Heidecker decision last year. And so, as a reminder, the decision required that the department had to reclassify a number of subdivided lands. The way we were interpreting the classification of those undeveloped subdivisions was that they should be classified as residential tract land. And that has a higher value, of course, and the Supreme Court disagreed with our interpretation of whether to classify them as residential tract land, and their decision required that we reclassify them into the lower value agriculture, mostly grazing land. So we've had to spend, as you recall, that had an impact on your certified values last year. Unfortunately, much of that impact came post-certification, and so we had to do the revised version. Well, this year we wanted to let you know that these values that Judy's going to deliver to you and go over are up to date and contemplate and include the reclassifications that are required by the decision. There are, however, a handful of subdivisions that we've reclassified that had prior appeals in place that may be eligible for and asking you for tax refunds. Again, the way the decision worked, since the 2009 is when the values that we put on books for the 2009 reappraisal, if someone had appealed that value and the Heidecker decision did indeed overturn that issue, if those folks had been paying taxes on those higher values and now we've had to reclassify their values downward, they would be eligible to come in and ask you for refunds on taxes paid now that their values are going to be brought down. And in the 2014 certification process, we have identified a handful of subdivisions that indeed are likely to be eligible to come to you and ask for about a $73,000 refund of taxes that go back to when they had appeals in place.
They have to ask though.
They have to ask, and it is the county, it is the commission, full discretion of the commission whether you grant those refunds or not. So you don't have to do it, you have discretion to choose some, all, or none of those refunds, depending on how you want to handle that. And then the other thing I wanted to remind you of, in addition, statute, Montana Code at 1510-420, section 9A, so 15-10-420, subsection 9A, also gives you the option to levy additional mills to fund these $73,000 in refunds if you felt that you couldn't absorb that $73,000 in your budget. There's something called a judgment levy, there's an emergency levy, and we believe that a judgment levy, and obviously you want to check with your county attorney to confirm his or her interpretation, but we believe that, you know, a high decker is indeed the equivalent of a judgment, so that if you needed to raise additional mills to deal with the costs of implementing that judgment, that you would be able to do that as well. But again, granting those potential $73,000 in refunds will be your discretion, but I wanted to be here, one, to let you know the good news about the certified values, that high decker should be fully implemented now, that we do have that handful of subdivisions with potential $73,000 refund liability, that you could handle that by budgeting it into your current budget and just deal with it as it comes, or if you felt you needed to manage with some additional levies, that the statute is there for you to consider for some additional mills. And so the real good news for this year is we're able to help you deal with this at the front end of your budget process, not at the back end, because the timing of the high decker decision last year caused all of us to do a lot of scrambling. This year we're able to give it to you on the front end. So, Madam Chair, that was all I really had to present, and then I was going to ask Judy, with your permission, to present to you the certified values and go over at a high level what they are, and then you guys can get into the weeds whenever you're ready to do that. So unless you have any questions of me, Madam Chair, I turn it over to Judy.
All right, just a quick couple of questions.
Okay.
How many subdivisions? You said a handful. Last year we were told anywhere from 3 to 12. What is the number?
What we've got left that has the potential refunds is actually 5.
Okay,
And Judy's staff has the details for you folks, so you can understand what those subdivisions are and what the potential refunds would be for each of them. So that's the remainder where we have the potential refund issue.
okay. Is that the 73,000
Yes,
from those 5?
Correct.
Okay. And also, any chance of a partnership? If we did decide to refund that 73,000 or a portion of it, could we do a 50-50 cost share or refund share with Department of Revenue?
I'm glad you asked that question. Unfortunately, you wouldn't be able to, the legislature would have to approve that. The department does not have the authority within its budget to do anything like that. So you would have to take that to the 2015 legislature and ask them for an appropriation to give us the authority in our budget to be able to do that. But as
Okay.
the current budget and as current law stands, no, we wouldn't be able to do that.
Okay, all right. I think that's all my questions. Do you have any, Elaine?
I don't right now.
All right, then the stage is yours, Judy.
Okay.
Jen will give the finance officer and the treasurer their copies of your budget.
No, that's usually what's been done, so I think we should stick with history.
I've just put we put the countywide levies on top and then the countywide school levies below it. Looks like our total taxable value this year is $13,158,561, with the newly taxable portion being $59,782. The total value of the net gross proceeds is $13,158,561. And that was your incremental taxable value, and then your net gross proceeds is $223,754. And then, of course, if we go to the countywide school, which is right below it, we have your total taxable value of $13,158,561. Your newly taxable of $59,782, And then your last year incremental taxable value was 13,158,561, with your net gross proceeds of 223,74. And then, of course, then we go down each levy district like we always do, just in the whole packet there.
Refresh my memory, Peter, yep, from last year, if so, how much?
Okay. I brought those just in case you had asked. Our county levies last year, we had total taxable value, last year was 13,540,012. 13,540,012.
That was decreased though, wasn't it, October 21st?
Was this the revised packet? Do you remember what that revised one?
So it's down then?
No, it's still up because it ended up being 13,046 something, I
Right.
think.
I'm so
Okay.
sorry, we just
Yeah,
grabbed
in
it.
October. I have to thank you for not including the detention center separately. Even though it was the same, that provided the public with nothing but no less than 150 questions. Absolutely confused them.
The detention center is a countywide. So I think
Exactly, it
they've
had
done
its own
in-
sheet last year, and I think that's why everybody was so confused.
Right, and I think that there were a few others that in the past that they had certified independently on their own sheet. And we've just refined that process this year, so if it's countywide, it's countywide, it's included.
Thank you. So let me ask a question. We followed the state formula in trying to guesstimate what our valuation would be, and it came up at 13,477 something. Now, I know it's just a guesstimate. I know there certainly could have been a mathematical error, but my question is that reduction to 13,158 a result of those subdivisions, others than the 73,000 we talked about?
Judy, what do you think of that? I mean, obviously, when we do those preliminary projections, you know, the word preliminary is key, because there can be some volatility in what's going on out there, but more importantly, we don't usually have the complete data at that point in time. Judy, do you have any thoughts on what might explain the difference between the prelim and the final
And
here?
I'm just curious, when did you do the budget?
A month ago?
And so these were just recently done, these subdivisions, revisions for 14, we had just completed those just maybe a week or two ago, so that could account for that.
So that is
70.
quite a hit on this county. We're talking $300,000, right? Or is it 200? Okay, it's 300, almost $300,000 is what that's hit us. That's quite a dent.
Well, and that decision, it was a large impact to the county, you know, because of Waffle, so much from his non-qual is so much more reduced than the other taxing levies.
Alan, one of the issues we had last year,
Mhm.
but two of them. One is, we were never advised, even though the decision was made in Broadwater County, that isn't something that clerk of court has the legal purview to go through each decision and determine who she's going to call to advise of decisions. When that decision was made, Broadwater County was never advised by Department of Revenue, so we had no chance as a county of withstanding to appeal
Mhm.
that decision. And the one effect in Broadwater County is quite different than the one in Gallatin with BLM.
Right.
So that was the first, I guess, comment that I just want to make. I know there's nothing we can do about it now.
Mhm.
It's done, it's still a $300,000 hit to this county. But my other question is, there is a subdivision on the southern end, and it's
Okay.
on Price Road. If you look to the north end of Price Road and you look at the south end of Price Road, the taxes per lot after subdivided, now this is before they started refarming, but even now that they're refarming it, it's taxed at the lowest ag rate, whereas before it was subdivided, it was at the highest ag rate. So why wouldn't you go back to the previous ag rate rather than an even further reduction?
They may,
No, you go ahead.
they may have submitted an ag application to qualify for ag instead of non-qual. And without knowing exactly the subdivision, it's hard to say why. And it could be.
It's the one that started all this, if I'm not mistaken,
Price
Price Hills.
Right,
Yeah.
prices, they're contiguous, they don't have to be a farming community in order to get non-qual. And I don't know that they are in egg status, I would have to double check. Priceville is an egg, because have they submitted their application?
They were over 160 acres
Oh,
contiguous lands.
That's right, so they're over 160, so they don't even have to apply for an application, they qualify by land size.
And that I understand, but it's not actually my question, and Jen, maybe you can help with this. My issue is, my question is, why, when a piece of land is subdivided, does, after this legal decision, the taxable value of that lot is less than it was before it was subdivided? When it was an active farm owned by John and Jerry Smith, they were paying a particular ag rate that was of the higher ag rates. Then they decided to subdivide it. They got this, well, even before this determination by the Supreme Court and after, that revaluation of those lots went not from the ag rate that it had been before subdividing, but after subdividing even lower.
Sure, and let me answer this and see if I kind of understand what you're saying, Madam Chairman. When we went through a reappraisal cycle in 2009, the agricultural land had not been touched in 40-plus years. So then when we came through and did soil, we got the soil productivity from, remind me, the University of Montana Ag. And what happened was they had some grazing land, and that is very possible in the reappraisal before. It could have been at this part, it was called 2B, 2A grazing, irrigated. It could have ended up in wild hay, something like that. That is all considered agriculture. So when we did the productivity for Price Hills, is that the one we're speaking of? Sorry.
But it's just an example, but yeah.
Right,
yes.
no, and that's exactly right. Basically, you know, your irrigated is productivity higher because you're placing the water on the land. It came in at a low grazing because of the productivity on the land, that because they hadn't done anything with it, so.
Okay.
And when they were actually devoted to agriculture, you know, you go and you fertilize your land, you water your land, you watch your nitrogen and your hydrogen, or you know whatever you do.
Sure.
Commissioner Gravely would know. So that, and it is quite possible that they had it up here because the productivity was higher than when they subdivided it and started selling.
Okay. I will just say for the record, that feels really wrong. I know there's nothing Department of Revenue can perhaps do about that, but it just doesn't seem right, and the public is with me on this.
Right.
If you subdivide, why do you get a lower tax rate? This doesn't make sense, but that's just my
And
commentary.
that's perfectly fine. It's just basically based on the productivity that we get, and we have the maps and all that. So yeah, we
Thanks.
understand.
No, and-
I've forgotten that, I'm sorry, I didn't see where your initial question was going, I've forgotten that they changed the agricultural budget.
Yes,
Right.
thank you for reminding us, Madam Chair, because that is important. We had just, the 2009 reappraisal was a whole re-establishing what ag uses were and assigning new productivity values based on those. But Madam Chair, we would agree with you on the principles that Heidecker addresses, which is why we were willing to appeal it to the Montana Supreme Court. Feeling like once it's been turned over into a residential use, again, that was kind of what we were, how we were hanging our hats of our classification of it as residential tract land versus ag. But, the Montana Supreme Court chose to disagree with us, and so we're where we are today. So, but we felt very positive about what we were doing, hence the willingness to take the risk to appeal it to that level, appeal the district court decision. So.
And I appreciate that on behalf of our citizens and our $300,000. I appreciate that very much.
I wish we could have been more successful, but you know how those risks are when you take things to court. So.
Sure. And actuals to actuals, we did go up, and I think that's the takeaway.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Great.
Yeah. So anything else, Elaine? Any questions, concerns, comments?
Wish we had more money.
Yeah. No, our budget was strong last year. It is strong this year. We don't use PILT to balance our budget.
Mm-hmm.
We use it for unforeseen.
Okay.
I imagine that 73,000 will come out of PILT,
Okay.
rather than hit our budget. I I think it's smart budgeting that was started before our predecessors, and we've just continued to practice. So even though it's not as much as we would like, it's actually, it still makes for a strong budget, so,
Right.
yeah. So, anything else on the money side of it? Because I have a personal comment I wanted to make with you here, Alan.
Well, I think the last thing would be just to remind you that going forward, next year will be the new reappraised values. So next year will be a busy year for us and for you in terms of property taxation, because everybody will be receiving their 2015 new reappraisal assessment notice. So we'll all get assessment notices next year, and so it's gonna be a little bit of a busy budget year. But we're pleased that the Heidecker decision should be behind us. But next year's certification of values will include the new values from the 2015 changes. And so this will be the beginning of a busy time next year, because all of your citizens will have received their assessment notice. You know, the good news on one hand is that it's not likely to be major changes on a parcel by parcel level, just because the market has been, you know, on the flat side since 2008, the 2008-2009 cycle. So just remember that next year will be a big year, so you'll be hearing a lot from your citizens next year because of the everybody getting an assessment notice. So, and with that in mind, pardon me, I didn't do enough of the history to know how long each of you have been in your office. But if you were not here, then please make sure our staff will be very diligent at helping you understand the reappraisal, and sometimes it can be confusing because we have that 6-year phase in and everything keeps changing every year, you know, rates, exemptions, etc. And so our staff has always been diligent, and Jennifer and Tracy and Judy will be here to help you guys deal with you know, whatever your citizen questions are and whatever yours are with the 2015 reappraisal. So we'll stand ready to make sure that it's as smooth as possible for you in your budgeting, and mainly just dealing with your citizens and their questions. So.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
You have 2 parcels of land side by side.
Okay.
They're both grazing, and they're in the mountains, and they're being taxed completely different. Why is that?
Well, I'm going to turn to Jennifer, Judy, and Rocky if necessary. What are some of the variables that could have an impact on 2 parcels that appear to be, you know, same use, same classification, but being taxed differently?
Thank you. Yeah, we do have another classification along the same lines as agriculture, which is forest land. You have to have 15 acres of trees in a particular tree and so many board feet in order for that to be the case. So if it's up in the mountains, they have 15 acres, even if they're side by side. One can have no trees and one can have all the trees, depending on the acreage, and they will be taxed totally different. Forest land is less than grazing as far as sometimes the valuation looks more, but it's the lowest you can go as far as.
They both have trees.
They both have trees, but they have 15 acres.
Yes.
That is the standard point. So then somebody that is side by side, that person that's getting taxed less needs to come in and talk to us and probably fill out a forest land application to get that. You have to have that on file as well.
So it might be the different classification, and the taxpayer needs to make sure they're advocating for the proper classification.
And it could be a different in productivity as far as agriculture as well.
And is there any improvements on the land, or is it just land?
And the other one has a really nice cabin.
Okay, because could that also have an impact? Is the improvement values?
The improvement values could be, you know, obviously the one would be more than the other, but it doesn't kick them out of forest land like it does non-productive patented mining claim. Is that kind of what you meant?
Right.
It wouldn't change their land value, right, right. And it could be that we need to go see it too.
You know, Holland,
I
I'll
might
take you
have a
right.
meeting with you later.
I'll do that. I'm gonna hold you to that too.
Are the size of the parcels the same?
I'm not positive. I think so, but I can't say with my line on it. Like on the line.
And that's a huge determining factor, you know, especially when you get into what's called non-qualified ag land. It's still class 3, but the tax rate is 7 times what it is for ag land. So we've got size, productivity, classification, if in fact one meets forest, the other doesn't. Keep in mind, forest land is determined by the University of Montana. They give us and say, these 15 contiguous acres meet commercial timber qualifications to be qualified as forest land. And so forest land has about half the tax rate. In fact, it's one of the lowest tax rates for property. So we got about 3 or 4 variables there that could, you know, what are the soils exactly the same? Typically side by side, yeah, but in the mountains you can have rock outcroppings and stuff like this, so that could impact it. Forest land classification, and more importantly, the size. And then of course, if one has improvements on it, if it's forest land, 1 acre is taken out along with the value of the improvements. And that 1 acre on forest land is at market value. Forest land, residential, or non-qual ag, the 1 acre's at market value. On agricultural land, the 1 acre that comes out is at the highest productivity of ag land values, which is irrigated, but that's typically substantially below what market value is. So it'd be, Jim needs to look with you and see what the answers are.
She knows all the answers.
Thank you, guys.
With the reassessing that'll be done next year,
Mhm.
there was an ARM decision at the Department of Revenue to kind of, as far as our experience here in Broadwater County, we lose Jen and Tracy each a day here, a day there to go and work in White Sulphur, go to other counties. Will that affect Broadwater County? I mean, if our warm bodies who need to be doing all this work are performing that job somewhere else, does that have an adverse effect on our county?
Well, Madam Chair, first of all, it's our goal that that it won't and it shouldn't. Before we did some of the reduced office hours that the legislature put into place in 2011, we've done some time studies of each of the offices to determine, you know, how much time was needed. We did studies of number of phone calls, number of walk-ins, just the amount of workload, work that could put clerical kind of work, computer work that could be done for a county but in a different location. So it has been our diligent hope and expectation that anywhere where we have reduced staff office hours, that it will not have an impact on the speed and the efficiency of you getting what you need, the treasurer getting what they need, the clerk and recorder getting what they need. So at this point, it is our belief that no, it should have no impact. At this point, I know in talking with Judy and Rocky, we're very comfortable that we've got our staffs in these counties, including Broadwater, where they need to be at this point in the 6-year cycle. And then I think the other good news about the value changes being pretty small this time, as opposed to 54% on a statewide basis in '09, I don't think we'll get anywhere near the number of appeals that we got, which means that the workload on the staff on dealing with, you know, appeals looking backwards shouldn't be as great as it was last time, which means Jen, Tracy, and Judy will be able to stay focused on, you know, today and going forward, and not spending years catching up on appeals that we can expect. So I think we're pretty optimistic that that will work in our favor as well. Are there any specific things that are falling through the cracks at this point since we made the change, or you're just kind of wondering, are we going to have any issues going forward?
Exactly, just having
Okay.
a forward view, yeah.
Okay.
And since you're here, maybe one of my last comments is, I want you to know how much Jen and Tracy are both valued by Broadwater County. The staff, the county staff that is here, work with these guys hand in hand. You saw how Jen was able to answer my question, even though I
Mhm.
perhaps didn't phrase my question very well. They work very well with us, and I think you need to know that. They're extremely valuable, even though they're not our employees, we do consider them part of our county family. So,
And they work well with all our employees.
oh, tremendously, yeah.
Good. Well, commissioners, thank you for that affirmation. It is important for me to hear that. And I have to admit, Madam Chair, that I've been pretty impressed with Jen since I've been here this morning, and she's been able to, answer my questions, answer your questions, and I've learned quite a bit just in the hour and a half I've been here with her. So I appreciate that affirmation, and we take seriously the relationships that we ask our local staff to have with you and all county employees. So thank you for that affirmation.
Absolutely, and I appreciate your coming too. I think we, after last year, have some fence mending to do, and I
Mhm.
think you're coming down here, and all you guys being willing to sit and listen to our questions really goes a long ways to building that foundation again. So
Great.
thank you for that.
Well, you're welcome, Madam Chair. That was our intention, and also I would add that since the timing and the impacts of the High-Decker decision, we have done some internal process and changes so that we can make sure that what happened last year here won't happen again here or in any other county, with more diligence when a decision comes out that has that big of an impact, that we're more diligent getting together with the local governments that are impacted. So we've done some learning since last year as well, and we hope to be better tomorrow than we are today, and better this year than we were last year. So
I think that's the most we can expect.
well,
Thank you for that.
And we appreciate it.
thank you.
I think we're done. Any questions?
I don't.
All right,
All right.
thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Glasses there. Oh, I don't have a pair of glasses.
Judy, did you have one of these for, oh, never mind.
Did you need another copy?
No.
Oh, Judy, sorry. Doug isn't here today. Do you have a packet for Debbie?
Yeah, I think Jen shared it downstairs.
Perfect, okay,
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure she could get started.
Yeah, no, she has it
All right.
downstairs. Uh-huh.
Thank you.
And we can make as many more as, I think Jen's got a couple just laying in the ready.
Okay,
All right.
perfect, thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Kearns.
Morning.
Morning.
How's it, I got here late. Is this the meeting that they tell you what your valuation is?
Mhm.
How's Broadwater County look?
We actually increased by $112,000.
Wouldn't we have a
Last
lot more
year.
with all the new houses being built?
We should, and it should have been about 300,000 more than that if the Supreme Court hadn't decided that subdivided land until
Oh,
it's
that
sold
one,
is
yeah.
the least expensive agricultural tax rate.
Yeah.
So that hit us hard because we had so many subdivisions.
What are most counties doing? Are they experiencing increase? Are they experiencing decrease? I guess, did they?
We
Hear.
didn't
Didn't get
hear,
in there. Okay.
and we didn't ask that question,
Yeah,
we really just
just
focused on Broadway.
Curious how Broadwater County's doing compared to other counties, but yeah.
Yeah,
It takes a lot of new houses to increase.
Does it? Okay.
levy.
yeah,
Because
A
we
lot
are
of-
getting new, aren't we, new houses and new
Mhm.
things in Broward County, I think, yeah.
that $300,000 loss was offset by Graymont's tracks that they did.
Oh, sure, that's right.
The hay business just south of the
Yes.
bunkhouse.
Yeah,
Oh gosh, oh, the big barn at the southern end of the county.
oh, yeah.
Dean's improvements, all those business improvements that are a higher rate.
Yeah,
And those, oh, and RY Timbers, new saw,
okay.
all of those added to the positive for us and offset that $300,000 loss.
Yeah,
So our
that's-
value went up because of the businesses.
Yeah, so you would have had a loss actually with that court decision had you not had another.
Exactly.
I think what
Yeah.
you've said in your meetings, I think Broward County's gonna do nothing but grow, and I mean,
Yeah.
we're right in between hell and Bozeman, whether we like it or not, right?
Yeah, in fact, the Chamber of Commerce for the state just made a statement from a study they did that they expect Bozeman to be the largest city in the state in the next 10 years.
Bozeman,
Yeah,
wow.
it's exploding with technical,
Yes.
which is
yes,
expected to
yeah.
stay. It's not a short-term growth. So we'll get some of that.
Well, you don't have any more Bobcat then.
Oh,
Yeah, Fox on one.
Or Grizzly.
Grizzlies.
Yeah.
You know, I always have to be careful when that topic comes up, because I have kids that were Grizz, I have kids that were Bobcats. So
One of the comment I hear is how poor Broadwater County is, and yet, according to the statistic you passed out, we're the 13th highest per capita income. So,
Yeah.
and I'm sure every county has a certain amount of poor people, and maybe they're the ones you see, but I don't think Broadwater County is any worse, are we? Than I think maybe lower income families tend to gravitate here because property prices are lower than trying to buy a house in Bozeman or Helena. But I
And
just-
taxes are lower, so we do bring, I
Taxes
think
are-
we bring families just starting out that would have otherwise been in the two large counties to either side of us. And as compared to those, perhaps that's where people get the idea that we're poor. It also comes from history, when people used to call towns in that dirty little stop in the road.
Yeah,
Well, we're no longer that either.
Yeah.
I think just old habits die hard, but we're frugal, we're not poor.
yeah,
And there's also perception. You know,
Mhm.
we've always been poor. We are poor.
yeah,
Right,
yeah, that.
right. Yeah, change is hard. So any other questions on the budget? We could recess for 20 minutes if you wanted, and then start again at 10.
Can I lift you
Yes.
$10 to $15 from you, and I'll give you your tickets for Mary Poppins?
Yeah.
If you don't have them, I'll give
Didn't I pay you with the check?
Yes, but I misfigured the amounts, they were $22 again, I'm not a very good banker, but
Do
anyway.
you want it recessed?
Oh, yes, please, we'll go ahead and recess until 10. So,
I told her they were 17, but I think you paid me 22, didn't you?